Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Whether you're at the beginning, the middle, or near the end of your Pesach prep, I know you will find immense value in this conversation. If you're like me, you're looking for the right inspiration to really begin your deep dive into the prep for this holiday. And for so many of us, this is going to be it. Before I welcome our special guest, I want to frame the conversation with a quick Dvar Torah. So in the Talmud in Sota 11b, we read, Darash Rav Avira Bishar Nashim Tzakaniot Shehayu Be'oto Hador Nigalu Yisrael Mimitzrayim. Rav Avira taught in the merit of the righteous women that were in that generation, the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt. So the liberation of the Israelites from slavery and the subsequent birth of a nation was allowed to happen because of the merit of the women in that generation. We are all indebted to those women for the freedoms we have today, and as we are charged with the retelling of the story of the Exodus to the generations to come, we should be mindful of those women. But the way that we celebrate Pesach today is a really multi-pronged effort, from special Pesach projects and Divrei Torah by our children, to getting rid of chametz and a deep spring cleaning, to planning and hosting our seders, the menu planning, the shopping, the guest list, etc. For so many, the preparation for Pesach has become like running a marathon. And by the time we get to that first night, just like when you're done a marathon, you pretty much collapse in exhaustion, and it makes it not so fun. But it really doesn't have to be that way. We can de-stress the Pesach prep. We can divide and conquer everything that needs to be done so that everyone has a comfortable seat at the table. And with that, I want to introduce our guest. Mara Strom is the author of the popular blog, Kosher on a Budget. Everybody insert fangirl here. For 10 years, she's been teaching her followers to save on what they need so they can splurge on what they want. Mara just released her brand new guide to a stress-free Passover, which I purchased and handed off to my spouse so he can make sure everything is done before the Chag. Thank you. The guide to a stress-free Passover is helping Jewish families everywhere prepare for the holiday without all the stress. Mara's approach blends humor, tough love, and lots of pre-filled lists, so you never have to wonder what you should do next. And without further ado, I give you Mara Strom.
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking me to be here. Thank you all for joining us today. I know some of you are watching this on Facebook. Some of you are watching us on Zoom. If you have questions at any point during, you can comment wherever you're watching. If you're watching this on Zoom as the webinar, you want to just raise your hand and let us know that you're here. If you're watching this on Facebook and you have questions, just leave them in the comments, and the questions are being monitored, and we'll do our best to try to answer them throughout the course or at the end. So as you heard, my name is Mara Strom, and I write the blog Kosher on a Budget. If you are new to me and don't know what Kosher on a Budget is, I will just tell you that it sort of addresses the intersection between the Jewish community and the female community. That's kind of like my primary audience, mostly Jewish women, although there are some men who follow Kosher on a Budget. Most of the community is kosher keeping, but not everyone. I would say about 10 or 15% does not keep kosher, and of that population, maybe even some people aren't Jewish. So we do have kind of a nice cross section, and we reach out to a lot of people, and I try to make myself as accessible as possible on the site. What Kosher on a Budget is known for in a lot of circles is deals. I post a lot of online deals, and everybody loves a great deal, myself included. But part of my real reason for posting all those deals is because I want people to understand that you don't have to spend a fortune on the things that you need and even the things that you want. And so if you're going to go shopping, I would rather you go shopping and pay as little as possible. So that's the deal part of Kosher on a Budget. But there's two other pieces of Kosher on a Budget, which you may also know me for. I try to share bits of my life, whatever wisdom I have gathered along the way, which is, generally speaking, limited, as we all have limited wisdom. But I try to share what I've gathered along the way in as humble of a manner as possible. And so one thing that I like to share are recipes. I am not, full stop, a recipe creator. I am not gourmet. I'm not like a fancy kosher food blogger, but I like to feed my family tasty, whole, healthy, fresh food, and I like it to be easy. In fact, I was looking recently, and like 90% of the recipes I've shared on Kosher on a Budget have the word easy in the title. So basically, if it's not easy, I'm probably not going to do it. So if you're looking for easy recipes, I do share those. And then the other piece that I share, the other really true and sort of revealing piece of myself that I share is I share the story about our sorry about that, about our families, my and my husband's struggle with personal finances. And about 12 years ago, we went through a complete transformation with our personal finances. And going through that transformation not only changed our bank account, it also changed me. I believed until that point that although I'm a fairly intelligent person, I did pretty well in college, I had pretty good jobs, I had a good career, I believe that I was not smart enough or capable enough, or I just didn't get how money worked. And that is why I could never be good at money. What that looked like for us is that we were $35,000 in debt. So about 10 or 12 years ago, my husband and I decided that that was the end. We were going to get out of debt, which we did. And then we turned it around even further because we saved up about $20,000 into an emergency fund, which is sitting there today. I mean, occasionally, if there's been an emergency, we've depleted it. We've always built it back up. And most importantly, for the sense of changing myself, was that I learned that we actually can live within our means every single month. And that was a transformative experience for me in terms of how I felt about myself, how I felt within my marriage. I think how we communicated about money, everything changed. Why am I telling you this? Because when I started Kosher on a Budget, I said to my husband, how would you feel about me writing the story of what happened to us with debt, how we got into debt, how we got out of debt, and how we've changed our relationship with money? And my husband is like a saint. And he said, okay, go ahead and bear our, most personal information on the internet. So that's what I did. 10 years ago, I wrote the story of how we got in and out of debt and changed our relationship with money. Why did I do that? I did that because I realized as I was going through this transformation that one of the things that was most challenging for me is that I felt a lot of shame and embarrassment about where we were financially. I looked around my Jewish community. People drove much nicer cars than we did. They went on nicer vacations than we did. Their kids wore nicer clothes than mine did. I figured they weren't asking for help for tuition from their Jewish day schools. I felt a lot of shame. I thought everyone else has it together and I don't. And slowly I began to realize that my story was not actually so rare as I had told myself, and that a lot of people struggle. Maybe the specifics are not exactly the same, but a lot of people struggle with issues around personal finance. And I said, I don't want other people to feel alone the way I have felt alone. And so I went ahead and told my whole entire personal story on the blog, and I continue to share insights and information and strategies that we've learned along the way about personal finance, because I think it is really a lifelong, not struggle, because it doesn't feel like a struggle anymore, but we pay attention to it all the time. It's not something that we've forgotten about. So believe it or not, that whole thing that I just told you is actually related to a stress-free Passover, and I will tell you why. Because I wanted to take that experience of having gone through a struggle. Now we're going to talk about my struggle with stress and anxiety and perfectionism and just overwhelm around Pesach, that I had gone through a struggle, that I had figured out some things that had worked for me to minimize that struggle. And at the same time, I have a really amazing opportunity with Kosher on a Budget to hear from Jewish women all over the world who all the time write me and send me PMs and DMs and contact me. And I think that although a lot of these women I don't know in real life, most of the women I don't know in real life, I for sure could, we were maybe like 2 degrees separated. We could for sure be friends. But because we don't know each other in real life, I think it feels safer to tell me some things that maybe they wouldn't tell their sister or their best friend or whatever it is. So I get to hear from all these folks. What is really going on with them. And just, Daphne, are you hearing me okay? Okay, good. All right, I saw like a little mute button pop up and I want to make sure it was on mute.
We're good.
Okay, good. Okay, so what I realized in going through all of this was that there were certain commonalities. Women would write to me and they would tell me about their experience around Pesach. Pesach is like a huge time also on the blog. I'm sharing lots of deals for your Pesach kitchen. I'm writing recipes. I'm sharing those, tips about how to stay on a budget for Pesach. So there's a lot of content and a lot of people are reading, even new people, and they're coming to me and they're telling me their stories. There are 5 words. I went through all the emails and the PMs in preparation for this webinar. There are 5 words that kept repeating themselves. I'm going to read them to you. Stress, exhaustion, overwhelm, resentment, and anger. Okay, stress, exhaustion, overwhelm, resentment, and anger. Those are the 5 words that I kept seeing when people would tell me how they were feeling about Pesach. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm a mom. If I were to sit down with my 3 children and say, hey guys, I want to tell you what Pesach means to me, I would feel horrible if they walked away from that conversation and thought that Pesach means to me stress, overwhelm, anger, resentment, and exhaustion. And then I thought, well, it's not just my kids that I'm teaching this to. I'm also teaching this to myself. And this is our holiday of freedom, Chag HaCherut. And to me, freedom and those 5 words don't go together. And I thought to myself, okay, what if I figured out along the way, and how can I contribute in some small way to the attempt by those of us who are making Pesach to lower those 5 negative adjectives? I'm not promising you that you'll never have little remnants of those feelings, but they shouldn't be a pervasive, overwhelming feeling. So that is basically the reason that I wrote the guide to a stress-free Passover. Hang on 1 second. Sorry about that. So that is the reason that I wrote the guide to a stress-free Passover, because I wanted to reach out and speak to the people who had been speaking to me. I wanted to speak to myself as well, and I wanted to share what it is that I had learned. So let's jump into what our biggest stressors are about Pesach. If I were to ask you right now, you can comment in the chat or you can comment over on Facebook. The guide to stress-free Passover is divided into 3 sections. Cost, meaning your budget, your finances around how much does Pesach cost you. That's the first chapter. The second chapter is about cleaning, and the third chapter is about cooking. If I were to say to you, which of those 3 things causes you the most stress personally? You can answer again in the chat or over on Facebook. I would love to know which those are. We're going to go through each of them tonight in this webinar, and then hopefully I'll give you a little bit of background, but also mostly I will give you some tips and tricks for dealing with the stress, minimizing the stress, reducing your workload in each of those areas. So I do want to say that if you already have Guide to a Stress-Free Passover, some of this you may already know already, and if not, you can get it. I hope you don't mind me saying. You can cleaning. Okay. So Judy is saying that cleaning is the most stressful for her. That's what I'm seeing right now. I'm not able to see the Facebook. I can just see the webinar. I asked the same question over on my Instagram feed. Overwhelmingly, like 76% of the respondents said cleaning was their biggest stressor. So don't worry, we're going to get to cleaning. But I want you to know that the Guide to a Stress-Free Passover, it's not, I mean, I call it a book, but it's more like a workbook. Nobody has time for a novel right now. There's not a lot of text in here. It's mostly very actionable items, checklists, menu planners, that kind of thing. And I'll show you what those look like. In terms of the cost, the reason why I want to address that first is because I try to address these issues sequentially. And it kind of makes sense that figuring out the budget, the cost, the finances of Pesach, it makes sense to start with that, since you have to do that in order to do the rest of it. When I had an amazing opportunity earlier this year to work with a number of different women who wanted coaching, financial coaching, specifically around the issue of Pesach. And they had kept all the receipts and were able to tell me exactly what they spent. But the question that I opened our conversation with was, can you tell me how the stress or how questions or concerns about costs affect you and affect your marriage? It was mind-blowing what I heard. For some of the women, what I saw was they were really carrying that stress inside of them. They were worried. They were anxious. They knew they didn't have the money to do the things they were doing, but they felt that they had to do it because it's Pesach. You can't not do it. They were putting things on credit cards. Some women were telling me, it's not stressful for me, but it's stressful for my husband. And that was causing issues within their marriage, because he was wondering, like, what's going on? Why are we spending all this money? Why can't we be more frugal? The tension around money is something that, around money and around Pesach, is something that has residual effects. The tension, the stress around cleaning typically ends once we sit down at the Seder and the house is done, right? I mean, you always have to clean up afterwards, but the tension about, like, I got to get the house clean for Pesach, that's finite. The stress around money, what I found in working with these women was that the stress around money for them about Pesach was not finite. It continued. It had tentacles that reached out. If they were paying off the bills from Pesach until June or July or August, that stress stayed with them. And then that caused them, as all stress does, to not just perhaps feel negatively about the money issue, but it also started to impact their feelings about other things having to do with the Chag. It percolated up within their marriages. the reason I feel so strongly, not just about Pesach, but all the time about dealing with these issues with money is to not let them fester, to not let them take on a life of their own. So if you want to minimize or eliminate the stress around money, I have 3 recommendations that I want to share with you today. The first one is that you decide together with your spouse, if you're married, how much money you're going to spend for Pesach. Now, that seems like a huge question, especially if you're not a regular budgeter. So in the guide to a stress-free Passover, I actually have a series of questions that I ask you to help you determine what the right number is for you. And one of those questions has to do with, well, how much money are you spending in other areas of your life? How much income do you have? Because obviously a family that makes $1 million a year could probably, quote unquote, afford to spend a little bit more for Pesach than, let's say, a family who makes $50,000 a year, right? I mean, that's kind of like the obvious piece of it. So the first thing you need to do is decide on a number. And once you've decided on that number and you have full intentionality about that number, I find that the stress goes down. Lots of times when people are stressed about something, they will do like the ostrich thing, right? They'll kind of like bury their head in the sand about it and say like, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to get what I need to buy. I'm just going to swipe my card and we'll figure it out later. But that phenomenon actually contributes to the feeling of stress because it's all going around in the back of your head, maybe subconsciously, but it's all up there. And what I want you guys to do is be able to get it out, put it down on paper, in agreement, in a conversation, so that you're being intentional about it. The second thing you can do is make a price list. So I'm going to show you an example of what a price list actually looks like. This is something you can find in your guide to a stress-free Passover. Okay. Now, a price list, for those who are regular followers of Kosher on a Budget, you've heard me talk about price lists ad nauseum. You know very well what this is. If you're new to Kosher on a Budget, what a price list does is it compares the cost of the goods that you need to buy at the various shops that you would regularly shop at. So what I noticed when I was living in Cleveland, Ohio, I live in Israel now, we moved 1.5 years ago, but I used to live in Cleveland. What I noticed in Cleveland is that some stores carried a pound of matzah for $3.49. And another store carried 5 pounds of matzah for $5. Now, I know friends of mine on the East Coast tell me that they can actually get 5 pounds of matzah for free when they spend $100 or $150 at their grocery store. If I buy the matzah for $3.49 instead of $1 a pound, which is essentially what the five pound box for $5 costs, I'm wasting $2.49 every time I buy it. The goal with the price list is to have this information and to be armed as a very knowledgeable, powerful consumer. I don't believe that people are overspending because they don't care. I think people spend more than they can afford because they don't have the tools to help them do anything different. A price book is your most essential tool. Now, there's 10 days until Pesach, not that I have to tell you that, which means that you probably don't have a lot of time to go around and gather all this information at the store. So what I suggest is that you share the list with a friend. I'm going to go to Giant Eagle. My friend is going to go to Winn-Dixie. The other friend's going to go to Costco, and we're going to get all this information. Okay. And then when you do your big shop, if you haven't done your big shop already, you'll have this information at your fingertips and you'll know where to get which items. That's a price book. The third thing you can do in order to cut your costs and also cut your stress about your costs is to ask yourself this question: can I make do or do without? On the one hand, we're taught by Chazal that we are supposed to use our nicest things on Pesach, that we're supposed to like have this beautiful celebration where we don't just, use disposable things and throw away things and the junk that we saved just for Pesach. We're supposed to use our nice things. We're really supposed to invest. On the other hand, I would argue or ask you, can you focus on doing that in a few areas, but in other areas, say to yourself, do I really need this for 8 days? I'm going to pick on things having to do with groceries. Have you ever bought one of those Manischewitz box cake mixes, like the coffee cakes? Okay. Those cost about $7 or $8. And I remember the first time I bought one and I was astonished at how much it cost. And then I opened it up and the pan was like yay big. I mean, it served like maybe 2.5 not very hungry people. So don't buy those cake mixes, right? Make your own fresh, healthy desserts from the ingredients that you get at the grocery store that you normally would buy anyway. Fruit, chocolate. I have lots of recipes in here and also on Kosher on a Budget that use that strategy. Another example, think about salad dressing. The Kosher for Pesach salad dressing could cost $4, $5, $6, or $7 a bottle, right? And I don't even know what that oil is that they make it with, like palm oil or something. It's kind of gross anyway. The point is that you can make for your salads olive oil, a little squeeze of lemon, some salt and pepper. That's what we do in Israel anyway. Super inexpensive. It costs just a few pennies. So when you're at the store, it's very easy to get sucked in by all those end caps and the special Pesach displays. And you start thinking, I might need that. I might need that. I better get this. I'm going to put this in my cart. And all of a sudden you've spent several $100s on things you actually don't need and could make do without. So that question of, can I make do or do without, is a question to continually ask yourself while you're going through this process. Okay, so that's what I got for you on cost. There are a few more things that you want to check out in the guide to Stress-Free Passover that have to do with cost, but I wanted to give you sort of the overview of how to deal with that issue. The next issue that comes up for many people, and as I said, I saw when I asked this on my Instagram feed, 76% of the people who responded said cleaning was their biggest stressor. So let's focus on this. The next issue that causes stress for people is the cleaning for Pesach. Now, I have seen a ton of memes lately, like on Facebook and Instagram, like joking about how, oh, I'm so OCD because I'm cleaning for Passover. Have you guys seen these things? So the reason they're funny, the reason they're a meme is because there's truth to that, right? Like that there's something a little bit madness making about the process of cleaning for Pesach. Now, generally speaking, I think there's like kind of more type A people and like less type A people. So generally speaking, kind of like the more type A people, you would assume kind of get more swept into the madness of Pesach cleaning, and the less type A people probably have an easier time with it. But I find actually that Pesach has like a magical quality, and it can actually make even the least type A person a little bit over the top. There's something about this idea that you cannot even have a single crumb in your house that contributes to this feeling of like madness, I guess. So I want to say that if the idea of like having a perfectly cleaned house for Pesach does not cause you stress, then that's amazing. And I want to say that if it isn't this notion of perfection, but rather just the sheer amount of work that it is, and that doesn't cause you stress, that's amazing also. But I have found from these women who contacted me and in my own life that elements of both of those things have been true at different times for me and for lots of other people. So the reason that I wrote this chapter was because I wanted to address head on some of that madness. And then I wanted to be able to give you some really useful tools. I give you a cleaning checklist to take you through the process. So I open the chapter on stress-free cleaning by saying, dust isn't chametz. Why do I say this? I say this because I'm saying it to myself. I'm not lecturing you, I promise. I am saying it to myself also. Somewhere along the lines, purging the chametz from our house, oftentimes, not for everyone, but for many people, it gets caught up in this whirlwind of every speck of anything has to be cleared out of my house. And on top of that, I need to organize the attic. And I need to declutter the basement. And my garage needs to be decluttered also. There's like a sort of like a stone rolling down the hill, and it's picking up speed as it goes and gathering a lot of moss with it as it goes. The reason I say that dust isn't chametz is because whatever you decide to do about your cleaning, just like I said, it's important with your costs of Pesach to be intentional. Let's be real with ourselves also about what's going on with Pesach. Now, I find the least helpful thing that a person can say to me when I'm stressed is, what are you stressed about? You're bringing this on yourself. So I'm not saying that to you. What I am saying is, if you say to me, or more likely to yourself, how can she tell me I don't have to clean the attic and the garage and the basement? Because there might be chametz there. If the mere thought of that doesn't sit with you, that's okay, but be conscientious about what it is that you're agreeing to take on. That's okay. And that's why in the chapter, I actually teach 2 different methods for cleaning your house for Pesach, the stress-free way. One method is for all of my friends and a little bit for myself who cannot separate the notion of spring cleaning from Pesach cleaning. No matter how many people say you shouldn't spring clean for Pesach, it's like in your head that that is what cleaning for Pesach is. If that is the case, what I want to say to you is that you can still do that without stress, but you have to be very strategic about how you handle it. You have to start early, okay? If you haven't started early, you've only got 10 days left, you may want to start to prioritize. You can start early and get everything done in that spring cleaning vein, but you want to organize your home into zones, work your way through the zones, and then once you've cleaned an area, do not, under any circumstances, let anybody bring chametz into that area, okay? I have a checklist here that takes you through every single room in your house to tell you exactly what you need to do. I find that sometimes something that causes stress for me, and I've heard this also from my readers, is not the doing of the things, but the deciding what things need to be done. The process that's going on up here can cause us stress. So I wanted to create those checklists for you because I want you to know that you don't have to worry about what you need to do. You just have to do the things. Now, if you are willing to take on a radical approach, a minimalistic approach to still being yotze on your cleaning for Pesach, you can actually clean your whole house for Pesach in 8 hours. Maybe even less if you have appropriate help, meaning if your spouse or your kids, or if you've hired someone to work with you, okay? It is possible to clean your whole house for Pesach. Will your house be spring cleaned? No, but you can spring clean in May. But your whole house will be clean and kosher for Pesach. Now, I explain again in here how to do that, and I even give you a checklist. The most important thing on the checklist is down here where it says, is chametz likely to be in the room? Then clean it. If not, skip that room. That's the most important piece of advice. When I talk about the 8-hour method, if some of you are screaming in your head saying, but it's not possible, I want to let you know that I have actually linked out to some rabbinic sources because I don't want you to think that I'm, God forbid, paskening for anyone and telling them how or what they need to do to kosher their house for Pesach. So I've linked out. And I think the reason that more and more rabbis are telling their congregants that this is a possibility and are advocating for this is those feelings that I talked about at the beginning of stress and overwhelm and resentment and exhaustion and even anger. That's a malady that's affecting our Jewish community. And honestly, in my experience, your husband excluded, I see that that burden is carried perhaps disproportionately by the women. So it's a burden that we're carrying. It's a malady that we're experiencing. And I think that that is an attempt to address it within a halachic framework. This notion that like dust isn't chametz, you can clean your whole house in 8 hours. The reason I didn't only present that as an option is because, as I said, I hate when people tell me, don't stress out about it, just don't do what you're doing, right? Because for some of us, whether it's because that's what our grandparents did and our parents, and we're going to do it, whether it's because of our own type A-ness, you know, I'm speaking to myself right now, for whatever reason, if you don't want to do it the 8-hour way, that's totally fine as long as you have full intentionality about what it is you're doing and you're able to prioritize. So let's say you don't have the guide to a stress-free Passover and you're not interested in getting the guide to a stress-free Passover. That is okay. You can still do this. Decide, am I going to go with a maximalist approach or a minimalist approach? Or am I going to do, like I personally do, some sort of hybrid where I don't full on, you know, reorganize the basement and the attic and the garage, but I do a deeper cleaning in each of the rooms of my house than I would maybe normally do during a regular week. So that's sort of my hybrid option. So the first thing is decide which option you're going to do, but with full intentionality, with full consciousness. I'm going to spring clean my house, or I'm going to 8-hour Pesach clean my house, or some sort of hybrid. And the next step obviously is to make yourself a detailed checklist so that once you get into the process of cleaning, you're not constantly being interrupted or pulled, you know, in a bunch of different directions. You have focus and you can cross those items off your list. I find a checklist is one of the best things that you can do to reduce your stress. So those are some of the ideas that I have about cleaning without stress. And let's move on to the last topic, which is cooking the stress-free way. So when I say cooking in and of itself, most people tell me that they don't find cooking stressful. In fact, Lindsay wrote it's the preparation, knowing or guessing what we have to cook so we know what we have to buy, and kosher for the whole week. Exactly. So I actually think that even though I called it stress-free cooking, there are 4 subcategories, if you'll bear with me, that go into cooking. First of all, there's planning what you're going to eat, planning what you're going to cook. That's making the menu plan, but it's also making your shopping list. 2 pieces of planning. The second thing you have to do is you have to shop, okay? You plan for what you're going to eat. You shop for the food you're going to eat. Then there's the cooking, which obviously oftentimes has many parts that goes into it. You know, there's the chopping, there's the getting all the ingredients ready, there's the baking, there's the roasting, there's the cooking. And the last thing is the cleaning up from the cooking of the food that you're going to eat. So I see 4 component parts that actually go into cooking. The first thing to do if you want to reduce your stress about cooking is ask yourself, okay, which of these things do I find stressful? I'll tell you, for me personally, planning is not stressful. You give me a good piece of paper and a pen, and I will sit down and I will plan to my heart's content. I've got a Passover menu plan in the guide, and I don't know if you can see, I wrote it in pencil in case I change my mind. Filling this out, it's a pleasure for me. I love planning. What I hate is shopping, okay? I find it stressful. It's very crowded. And in Israel, 2 weeks before Pesach already starts to be like completely bananas at the grocery store. You have to like elbow your way through. I find that super stressful and like gives me a lot of anxiety to just even walk into the grocery store. Okay, so planning is good. Shopping, not so good. I'm okay with the cooking. I don't hate cooking. I don't find it especially stressful. When I do find cooking stressful is when it intersects with other things I need to be doing. I need to be blogging. I need to send out my newsletter. I need to finish cleaning the house for Pesach. When all of a sudden I'm trying to cook and do 3 other things at the same time, that is when I find cooking stressful. And as far as the cleanup goes, I don't mind wiping counters and washing dishes, but I do find it stressful when everything is a mess. So it's the pre-cleanup that causes me stress. What do I do with that information? As I said, I'm happy to plan. I do the planning. It's my skill set and it doesn't cause me stress. In fact, I enjoy it. My husband feels that way about shopping, thank the Lord. Okay, he's happy to go shopping. He's really good at it. It doesn't drive him crazy. He doesn't mind the crowds. He's going to do the shopping. I planned. He's going to shop. The cooking we're going to divide up, and I'm going to make sure that I have appropriate help and support so that I don't have all those times where I'm like trying to cook and do 14 other things at the same time, causing me to feel stress. And then finally with the cleanup, again, we're going to work to make sure that there's appropriate help and support, including from our 3 children, so that the burden isn't falling on me. Because when I start to feel that the burden is falling on me, that is when that feeling of resentment that we talked about earlier starts to creep up for me. If you find that you get stressed out, like, oh, I'm so stressed out I have to cook for Pesach. Oh, I'm so stressed out that I have to turn my kitchen over and start cooking, right? If just that notion of getting all the food cooked and there's multiple dishes, break it down into those 4 component parts and ask yourself, which of these parts is the most stressful to me? The other thing that I want to advise you on, if I may, is to not add more work than you already have on your plate. Don't keep piling it on. What do I mean by this? Generally speaking, unless you're like a gourmet chef, Pesach is not the best time to decide that you're going to buy 4 new cookbooks and try 10 new recipes for your Seder. Okay? If you tell me I love cooking, I love experimenting, that's great. But maybe experiment with 1 or 2 things. Why is that? Because when you are cooking from recipes that you make regularly, that you know well, you're using muscle memory. When you make your chicken soup, when I make my chicken soup every Shabbos, I don't have to look at a menu. I don't have to look at a recipe. I don't have to wonder what I'm going to put in it. I know, I get it done. It's up in 5 minutes. And it's not just that it's up in 5 minutes. It's that I don't have any sort of like worry. Is this going to turn out? Am I doing this right? Oh, I have to flip back and look at the ingredients. Did it say half a cup or half a teaspoon? You know, I know exactly what I'm doing. That's far less stressful than trying out something new. And by the way, when you're trying out new recipes, it's not just when you're actually cooking, it's the planning and the shopping for those also, because you're constantly trying to make sure, do I have the right ingredients? Do I have everything I need? If you can reduce the number of new things you try and rely on sort of those tried and true family traditions. That's what we do for Pesach. And I even included some in the guide because I thought, well, what if you don't have any tried and true family traditional foods? Use mine. I promise they're all easy. The word easy is in the title. So that helps it's another way to reduce the stress and the tension. Parenthetically, I will add, as a mother to at least one very, I'll call it discerning child, not picky, discerning. One thing that I actually feel stressful is when I work really hard to make a meal and then none of it gets eaten. It gets rejected out of hand. Okay, I'm so not an expert on how to deal with discerning children when it comes to their palates because I've obviously failed in this category. But I will just tell you that everything that goes on my Seder menu are things that I know that all three of my children will eat and enjoy. And I'm not talking about, obviously we're not making like fish sticks and macaroni and cheese. It's Pesach, like it's normal foods, but I'm going on things that I know that they will like so that I don't have that conflict either within me or together with my child, because I know that that issue will not arise. So that's another reason to sort of allow yourself the luxury of relying on traditional foods. And when I say traditional, so in my head, traditional means like chopped liver and potato kugel. So you can make chopped liver. I've never made chopped liver, but you could make chopped liver and potato kugel. But to me, what traditional means even more are just things that we make year in and year out. Anyone who has read Kosher on a Budget for any amount of time knows that every year on Pesach, I make lemon strawberry sorbet for dessert, okay? Easiest recipe. It's water, ice, lemon juice, and strawberries, and sugar. And we blend it up and we put it in a pan and we freeze it in the freezer. And then I blend it again and then I freeze it in the freezer. And everyone is so happy. They start asking me for, at Purim, Ima, are you going to make sorbet for Pesach? People who've read my blog tell me that they've started making it and it's their favorite dessert now. It's so easy. It's so simple. It's so refreshing. Is it kugel or chopped liver? No, it's not traditional in that way. But for my family, it's traditional because they know that this is what they're going to eat on Pesach. I could make it during the year, but I don't. I only make it for Pesach. So that makes it special for us. By keeping things like that special, again, you're reducing your workload, which is reducing your stress load, and you're reducing your worry, like, will people like it? Will it go over well? Now is not the time for experimentation, okay? If you can allow yourself to experiment a little bit, but rely on tried and true, I think you will find that you have a lot less stress. So those are the main ways that you can sort of address the biggest topics of cost, cleaning, and cooking, the 3 C's that primarily cause stress around Pesach. And if there's any questions or any information that I forgot to give you, I'm happy to answer it now.
So I have a question. What is your advice for some of us, it's our 15th, 20th, 25th Pesach that we're making. What's your best advice for somebody who is going to this for the first time, whether it's they're newly married or they used to go to hotels until now, or they're newly observant? What is your top advice over how to streamline the process and like not lose yourself in the prep so that you can't enjoy the holiday?
So that is a very good question. And I assume that the person that I'm talking to has not really gotten started. Let's say like we're starting today. We've got 10 days left. We're starting today. What would you do? So the first thing I would do is I would say, try as best you can to come up with a reasonable amount that you think that you can afford to spend on Pesach. Give yourself the boundaries. Think of it as like a referee in a basketball game who's blowing the whistle when you get out of the boundaries. You need to know where your boundaries are. That's the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do, if you can sit with it inside of you, is embrace the 8-hour cleaning method. That's the second thing I would do. Just let go of the attic getting reorganized. Forget about the basement. You can do those things in May, I promise you. That's the second thing I would do. And the third thing I would do is I would say, okay, go ahead and sit down right now and make your menu plan. Because from your menu plan, you derive your shopping list. And from your shopping list, then you can start to delegate. So for example, I have in the guide to Stress-Free Passover, this pre-filled shopping list. There's plenty of room to add your own items, but the reason I have it pre-filled is when you're making Seder for the first time, when you're making Pesach at your house for the first time, there's so many details that it's very easy to stress out about forgetting the details. So the reason I made this pre-filled is because everything you need for your Seder, all the matzah that you're going to need, the pantry items that you're going to need, the basics that you need for Pesach are on here. Now listen, garlic is on here. If you don't eat garlic, just cross it off. I crossed it off. If you don't eat, I don't know, vegetables that can't be peeled, that have to be peeled, just cross it off. You know what I'm saying? But the idea here, the reason that I pre-filled it is because, again, I want to take that stress away from you. So I would, number one, determine your budget. Number two, I would embrace the 8-hour cleaning method, and then look at the checklist, put it on your calendar, get appropriate help to help you, whether that's your spouse or your kids or a cleaning person that you're going to hire to work with you for those 8 hours. And number three, make your menu plan and your shopping list. I think once those three things are done, you are ready to move forward with implementation. That's the sort of deciding, thinking about phase. Now you're ready to move into acting. The other thing I will just add that is in the guide to Stress-Free Passover, and if you don't have the guide, but you want to get this checklist, I will tell you that there's 2 different checklists at the back. One is about everything that goes on your Seder plate, because every year I'd be like digging up my art scroll Haggadah to try to remember what goes on the Seder plate.
I was just going to ask you that.
And there's everything that you need to bring. Yeah. And then there's everything that you need to bring to the Seder table itself, beyond what's just on the Seder plate. So like on here, obviously you have to remember the matzahs, the Haggadahs, wine or grape juice, your Seder plate, your bowls of salt water. You got to make up your bowls of salt water in advance. Let's see here. We always have hard-boiled eggs. I'll tell you a funny little story. When I got married, my husband said, "Are we going to have egg soup for our Seder?" And I said, what's egg soup? I was thinking egg drop soup. Okay. That's what I thought. And he said, "No, every year my family would have egg soup." And I said, "Okay, can you get the recipe from your mom?" And then his mom came to us, and I found out that what egg soup is just mashed up. Do you know this? Do you call it egg soup? I had no idea. Mashed up hard-boiled eggs with a lot of salt water poured on them. That's egg soup. This is such a perfect example of like relying on those traditional foods. I had never heard of egg soup, but it was a traditional food for my husband. And now on my list is extra eggs, because you cannot have a Seder apparently without egg soup. Also the pillows for leaning, your Kos Eliyahu. We do a lot of shtick around the 10 plagues, especially. So any of that stuff is on here. Your Afikoman prizes, a kittel if your husband wears one. So those kinds of things are all in there. And the reason that I put this in here is, again, if it's not written down, you're going to worry about what you're forgetting. Here, you don't have to worry. I remembered all of it. All you have to do is check it off.
Great, thank you.
The last thing I would add, I'm thinking as I'm going, I'm sorry. The last thing I would add is to take really good notes at the end of this year's Pesach. Okay? Because I promise you that you will not remember by this time next year whatever it was that you did, what recipes worked, what recipes flopped. If you bought 12 dozen eggs but ended up needing, or if you bought 12 dozen eggs and had 6 left over. Okay? Make notes of all these things. If this is your first Pesach and you buy a bunch of stuff, but as the like housewares and those kinds of things. But as the course of Pesach goes on, you realize, wow, I really needed a whisk, and I really need a better knife, and I really need a better frying pan. Write that down. So throughout the year, when there's sales on things, you can buy them instead of in a frantic rush having to get them next year, right before Pesach starts. Copious notes will help you improve from one year to the next until the whole thing becomes muscle memory.
Right. I was just going to say that we actually keep a list on our fridge, a running list that, in case, the parve bowl became dairy during a recipe, that we need to remember to replace the parve bowl. And if we need, 8 new peelers, because whatever the it is.
That's a lot of peelers.
But we have a lot of helpers.
Yes, everybody has to peel at the same time. Do you keep that list on your fridge year round or just during Pesach?
We keep it towards the end of Pesach, and then it kind of gets files away. My mother-in-law actually keeps it on the fridge year round. The other thing also is when you talk about shopping is sometimes we buy excess ingredients that some, I don't want to be all FDA-ish or whatever, but some can last from year to year. But if we find that we use it, or that, we kind of have an inventory of I have X and then it gets used, or it doesn't get used and I actually have 6X from last year, to not buy it again this year. So
absolutely. So one of the things I have for you, like a post-Passover epilogue note section here. And one of the things I say is I put away the following foods for next year. So like if you haven't opened your matzah meal, you can put that away. Again, cover it, you know, tape it up, whatever, so bugs don't get into it. I put away my spices every year, and then I just make a note of which spices I put away and which ones I'm going to need to get. Now, one way other than the fridge, which is awesome because it's right in front of you, is you can take this list and you can put it, you can scan it, you can upload it into your Google Docs. What I like to do is I have everything live on my computer. So I have a Google Doc at the end of every year. I make a Google Doc for Pesach, which has my menu plan, and it has my grocery list, and it has who we invited for which meals, and it has all of our Chol Hamoed plans in it, and where we went and who went with us and how much it costs and what phone numbers we had to call to arrange it. Everything is in this. It's like my brain for Pesach in this Google Doc. I take the link to that Google Doc and I set a reminder for myself in Google Calendar for the week before next Purim. Because I don't need to worry about Pesach until then. I don't need to be worrying about it in September. But I create this link so that a few days before Purim, I get like a little friendly reminder for myself, like, hey, Maura, Pesach is coming. Maybe you should start to think about it. Here's what you wanted to remember from last year to this year.
A couple more questions. Somebody who wrote in who said they're going away for the first days of Pesach and they're coming back midweek and they're just really lost about what they need to buy before Pesach. When should they start shopping? Can this person wait until Chol Hamoed to buy meat and whatever else for second days?
Okay, so first of all, I will say that I always find this to be a very challenging situation, right? Because you're away, but you still have to clean for Pesach. So it's like trying to mentally sort of organize yourself for what's going to happen. I'm not poskening for anyone. I want to make that 100% clear. My understanding, not as a rabbi, about what needs to happen in terms of the foods that you can buy ahead of time is that certain foods must be purchased before the Chag. That includes eggs, milk. Some authorities will say it includes all your meat. By the way, I'm assuming this person does not live in Israel, but if they happen to live in Israel, and if anyone is watching this who lives in Israel and doesn't already know this, you must buy your chicken, everything you're going to need for Pesach in advance, because they don't shecht any chickens in Israel during Chol Hamoed. So there will be no chicken in any grocery store to buy. So if you want chicken, you got to buy it beforehand. Okay, so there are certain foods that you absolutely need to buy in advance. It's like by the OU will tell you that, the CRC will tell you that, the Star K. Eggs, milk, meat. Many people also have the custom to not shop during Pesach at all, to not shop during Chol Hamoed. If that is not your custom, I would say don't add any unnecessary hardships to your life. But if it is your custom, that is something, to keep in mind as well. If I were going away for the Seder, in Israel, obviously we only have one. If I was going in America, if I was going away for the Seders, I would still menu plan for all the days that I was going to be home. And what I do at Pesach, and you may have seen this in the Passover menu plan that I shared, I actually plan out breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, during the year, if I'm menu planning and I'm in a good space with menu planning, I'll plan out dinners. I never plan out breakfast and lunch. Why do I plan it all out? Because it's very helpful for me to understand amounts of what I need to buy. How many eggs am I actually going to need? Well, how many days are we having eggs for breakfast? And how many cakes am I baking that have eggs in it? If I see everything written out in its totality, then I understand what I need to buy. So even if I was going to be away for the first days or the last days or half of Chol Hamoed or whatever it is, I would go ahead and menu plan for that whole thing and buy as much, certainly of my eggs and milk and meat, but also of the non-perishable. I would buy all those non-perishable items in advance, because the worst thing is to come back from your vacation. I don't know, maybe it won't feel so vacation-y, but to come back from being away and then get hit with the boom of like, oh gosh, it's reality and I have nothing to feed my family and it's Pesach. For some reason, that's more stressful than a normal week when you have nothing to feed your family. Right. You just feel so much more limited and you're not sure if you're going to be able to find things and maybe the store will be sold out. I would do as much as possible in advance to help reduce that stress level.
Okay. One last question that's like a little bit outside the scope, but somebody wrote in saying that they are going to be on their own. They live far away from community. how can this person make Seder special for themselves when they're doing it on their own?
So, I mean, I guess I would like to know, like, really alone, like just one person, or if there will be guests. So I think that the answer I want to give, I went to a class this week, or maybe it was last week, with a rabbi from an organization called Ayeka, which talks about like spirituality and connection to God and trying to find your own personal meaning also within the context of minhag and halacha and everything. And one of the things he said is, you know, how many hours I think it was a rhetorical question. I, of course, answered it. He said, how many hours do people spend preparing for Pesach? So I said, 40. And he's like, really? I'm like, yes. And then he said, and how many hours do you spend preparing spiritually for Pesach? And I said, 0. So what he challenged me and what I will challenge you is to remember that all of these things are important that we're doing. This preparation is important. But if we're getting to the point of the Seder where we're so exhausted and drained and resentful or angry or whatever, all those other negative words, overwhelmed, that I was hearing, that we're missing the ikar, we're missing the principle of what we're supposed to be doing, then we're missing out. So what he challenged us to do is say, find one piece in the Seder that really speaks to us, and to think about why and what that means. And that's I think what I would say. Okay, so I see that she's on her own the first night and possibly 2 guests the second night. Okay, so what I would suggest is to try to find the piece of the Seder that really speaks to you. And especially when you have guests, to focus on talking about that. What is meaningful to you? What is significant to you? And make sure that you put your time, energy, and love into building that piece of it up. So you don't get bogged down with all the details and lose kind of the significance and the meaning of what it is that you're doing.
That's really beautiful. I think that's a really great note to end on. And I mean, great advice for all of us who,
Yes.
In order for all of us to get the most out of Pesach and the Pesach Seder or Seders, depending on where you are this year. So I want to thank you so much for leading this conversation, Mara.
But I always want to say parenthetically, living in Israel reduces the stress because there's only one Seder.
There's only one Seder.
I'm very lucky.
Yes, agreed. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate the time and the effort that you put into this. I think that we had a lot of listeners and watchers and followers. So I'm grateful for your time. And I look forward to finding other ways to work together. Thanks, Mara. Chag Kosher.
I do too.
All right, be well.
Gamla, thank you. Bye.